Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Always a treat to be with you, Jack.
So let's start with the town hall meeting that you are having. And what issues are you prepared to bring up, and what are you expecting to hear from those attending?
Well, I'm really excited to be back in district. I've been in DC quite a bit. It's great to be home. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone tonight. We have a packed, sold out house. So I'm excited. All of our available space has been reserved. We've got a lot of people interested. My Republican colleagues aren't doing town halls around here much. And so people want to hear what's going on. We're going to address the obvious issues, Social Security, DOGE, what's happening in DC and what Democrats are doing about that. And we're going to take a lot of questions. People are going to be able to submit questions, and we're going to try to answer as many as we can.
And with regards to Social Security and DOGE, what's the latest that you're hearing about this?
Well, the funding stoppages have been frozen in the courts, and so a lot of funding has been resumed. I met with the city of Balch Springs this morning, for example, and they had some transportation funding initially paused by the DOGE efforts, but we were able to get that restarted. And so they're able to proceed with some very critical transportation works that were already on the ongoing process. And so we've been able to do a lot of that sort of thing. And, folks are really, really worried. I think we're very anxious about Social Security, very fearful of what the Trump administration is going to do to try to harm our seniors and people with disabilities to be able to obtain the necessary benefits.
And as it relates to, you and I have had conversations before as it relates to DOGE, as far as Congress having the power of the purse and being the body that decides what's cut, what's not cut, what's funded, et cetera. And so I'm wondering, we've got a $36 trillion debt. In your mind, is there room to make cuts in the budget?
Well, there's always an opportunity to make cuts. I mean, and I am for as resourceful and responsible government as anyone, but there's a process and there's a way to do it. That's through the appropriations process, through 12 different committee structures. That is their whole role and purpose is to look at programs item by item by item to determine, hey, has this outlived its useful life? Did this not ever achieve the goals that was intended, or it satisfied all that it was supposed to and it has run its course, or it's still needed and necessary. We need to proceed. The problem is the Trump administration is just engaged with a wrecking ball with disregard for anything that is meaningful, working, and important to the American people. And that's where people are really afraid and very concerned. But yes, I mean, there's opportunities to save money in the budget, but we need to go through the process to make responsible decisions.
There has been some discussion by Republicans about going back to pre-COVID funding from 2019. What do you make of that?
Well, again, it depends on the programs. I think they're wanting to go to pre-COVID funding in certain things, but not in all the things. Our defense budget is everything costs more now. We are 6 years from that time period, and the cost of living has gone up. The cost of housing has gone up. I even got my own tax appraisal today for my house. It's had a 30%, a 36% increase since 2020. So, I mean, I think 2019 levels aren't necessarily responsible either, depending on the need of the program.
And let's talk about tariffs. What do you make of the current situation there? And the president said that his goal is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. So talk to me about his thought there and how it's being executed.
Well, it's just reckless and irresponsible. It's erratic and unpredictable, and businesses can't plan on that. The other thing is, it's not reasonable to expect manufacturing to be able to be happen overnight. We can't just 60 days from now produce goods and services that companies have relied on. People import a lot of things from overseas. Texas is the ninth largest economy in the world because of that. We have a significant trading partner with Mexico and abroad as well. And, a lot of times what will happen is you might manufacture something here, but you order component parts and you order pieces from other countries to help manufacture that ultimate product. And you can't just turn that switch on. And so if we're not able to import, or we're not able to plan, then people are not able to fulfill their businesses. And that's why we've seen so many companies threatening to lay off folks, halting orders, stopping. We've seen a tank in the stock market. The unpredictability and the recklessness by which Trump is proceeding down this tariff plan is really causing havoc on the markets.
There has been some discussion by members of Congress, members of the Senate, about passing a check of sorts on the executive branch as it relates to tariffs. Is that something you agree with? I've also seen some say it needs to be brought back to Congress from the executive branch where it started.
I agree. I think Congress should exercise its oversight. And this is an area of foreign policy that Congress has a check and balance on. And Congress needs to do that. Republicans in Congress so far have abdicated their oversight responsibility to the executive branch. They're giving away all of their power. They're not exercising the constitutional power that they have. And it's really disappointing and unfortunate. Hopefully in 2026, the Democrats will take back both chambers and we can start exercising our power again.
One thing that's going on in Washington right now is Republicans in the House and the Senate are trying to come up with a reconciliation bill of the president's agenda. So we're talking about tax cuts, border spending, energy spending, etc. And this would have to pass, obviously, a simple majority in the House, but it would be a simple majority in the Senate as well, which is unusual because most of the time you need 60 votes. And so they're talking about tax cuts. And I'm wondering, where are you on tax cuts? Because they want to make permanent all of the tax cuts from 2017 and potentially add, as far as no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. So where are you on all those
Well,
either?
I'm for tax cuts that benefit working families and everyday people. I'm not for tax cuts that benefit the top, 100 wealthiest individuals in this world. And that's what the tax cuts seem to benefit right now. But, I fully support extending the child care tax credit, for example. That helps working families go to work and raise their kids and help their families. So yes, there's absolutely tax cuts. I'm for raising the tax on the middle class, and raising the income level such that we have a lower tax rate on our middle class families. I think there's tax cuts that we all support, but what we don't support are tax cuts for the wealthiest people at the backs and on the poorest people in this country and on the backs of working folks. And so we're not for making Elon Musk, for example, have a lower tax rate so that people don't get their Medicaid benefits and people don't get their Social Security benefits, and the list goes on.
And as far what is, I guess it always comes down to what's the definition of wealthy? So what would your cutoff be? And would those folks, would it go back up to what it was before the 2017 tax cuts, or would you support something higher?
Well, I think the current level right now is over $400,000. And I think if you're making over $400,000 a year, you can afford to pay your taxes. And if you're making less than that, then we need to make sure that we have a tax policy that's fair and that makes it to where you can provide for your family, send your kids to school, pay your mortgage, do all the things that you're supposed to do. But I think that that's a line right now that's in the tax code, and that's a line I support.
And what about taxes on businesses?
In terms of what?
Well, I mean, would you support increasing taxes on businesses?
Well, I think it depends. We have a lot of different taxes in the business realm. We definitely want businesses to be competitive. We want them to pay their fair share. We should close the loopholes that make it to where they don't have to pay any tax at all. It's ridiculous that a company like Amazon doesn't pay taxes because there's so many exceptions and tax loopholes that they get to take advantage of. We need a fair tax system. If everybody paid their fair share, then maybe the tax rate could go down for all of us. And I think that's the problem, that what we have is the wealthiest people have a lot of expensive lawyers and folks that can maneuver through the tax code and come up with exemptions that regular folks just don't have. And we need to make our tax system fair for everyone.
And several more questions. I know Medicaid is something that Democrats have expressed a lot of concern over the potential for $880 billion in cuts over a 10-year period. When I've asked Republicans about it, they say they don't want to cut for women, pregnant women, those who are at the bottom of the income level, the poor who really need and depend on this program. They want to take the people who are able-bodied men out of the equation, and they think there should be work requirements. What do you say to that?
Well, Texas Medicaid only protects women and children and disabled and folks like that. I mean, that's kind of where we are. And Texas, I believe, is the second highest state that needs Medicaid in the country. And so, cutting Medicaid will have catastrophic impacts on our healthcare system, on medical providers, and the people who need critical access to care. If we've learned anything from COVID, we have a global health world. When we can have catastrophic impacts in our public health and in our economic system if we don't have a strong public health community. And that means healthy people. You don't want sick people going to work all the time and for the restaurants and the places you do and making everyone else sick. We want people to get healthy. We want people to be able to access critical care, and we need medical providers who are willing to see these people. And Medicaid is the safety net of safety nets for folks to be able to get access to critical care. And if we have any cuts at all, I think it'll have devastating impacts in the state of Texas.
And what do you say about the work requirement that Republicans say is what they're really focused on?
The devil is always in the details. Obviously, if you have somebody, you can't put a work requirement on a 6-year-old. You can't put a work requirement on somebody who's
Well,
disabled.
it
You
would be
can't have,
able-bodied.
work requirement on pregnant women who just gave birth. And so the problem is it's all in the details of how all that's implemented.
Right, but they say when I've asked them specifically about it, they have said able-bodied people going to work, people who can work, etc. What do you say to that?
Well, I think right now, if you look at it, there's a lot of people that do work. And, I had a Medicaid expansion bill that had a work requirement in there, and it also raised the income level. But right now, you can work, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. You could work full time in the state of Texas and not hit the economic threshold to not be entitled to Medicaid. So there's a lot that we need to do to make this possible.
And my last question to you is there's obviously a very big issue right now with the Supreme Court and the administration over deportations without due process. Your thoughts on this?
It's outrageous. We are a country founded on laws. We're a country founded on law and order and the rule and respectful of the rule of law. And the Trump administration is flagrantly ignoring the Supreme Court. It's flagrantly ignoring our appellate courts and there's also flagrantly ignoring the rules that we have on the books that if you are in this country, you are entitled to due process under our laws. We are not a dictatorship. We are not a nation, a rogue nation that doesn't respect its citizens and doesn't respect the judicial process. And what the Trump administration is trying to do and the rhetoric coming out of so many Republicans is so dangerous to the health of our country. It's really alarming. And I hope everyone is just on fire about it.
Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch, thank you so much. We appreciate it as always.
Good to see you, Jack.